Hundreds gathered to protest Wednesday in the Canadian city of Toronto against a visit by a former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett.
I'm with Independent Jewish Voices. We're a group of Jews who support the Free Palestine movement from across Canada, and we've come out today to tell people that Zionism and Judaism are not the same thing. It's not part of Jewish values to oppress others, and it's really important for us to show that we support the Palestinian cause. We want our tax dollars to stop funding apartheid, and we want to cut all political ties with Israel, and we believe that the BDS movement, boycott, divest, and sanction, should be happening right now.
My name is Shada, and I'm with the Palestinian Youth Movement. We're here protesting an event where Zionist war criminal Naftali Bennett was invited by the former head of Indigo, the founder of the corporation of Indigo, and we're here in our city to say no to war crimes, no to Zionists, and that we will confront Zionism wherever we see it. Naftali Bennett has proudly bragged and argued and used it as merit points in his election about how many Palestinians he's murdered. He has the blood of Palestinian children, women, and men, of Lebanese men and children. He has destroyed hundreds of villages and proudly brags that.
Last month, lawyers filed papers on behalf of a Palestinian Canadian and 3 Canadian organizations seeking a government declaration that Bennett could not be admitted to Canada. The former Prime Minister came to speak in Toronto on Wednesday. The request alleged that he should be denied entry pursuant to the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act and for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The court action alleged that Bennett was deeply involved in the development of illegal Israeli settlements in the Palestinian West Bank. It alleges that the Bennett government significantly increased the development of illegal settlements on Palestinian land and supported the eviction of Palestinian families in East Jerusalem to establish illegal settler units there. Camila Escalante was in Toronto yesterday, and we spoke with her via Skype from there on Thursday. Camila, you were there. Tell us about the protest.
Well, yesterday, activists from the Palestinian Youth Movement and many other of the active Palestinian groups here in Toronto protested an event in which Zionist war criminal Naftali Bennett, who was the former prime minister, came here to a speaking event. This event was hosted by a corporate CEO who was the former or present head of Indigo. Indigo is this large Canadian bookstore chain, and it was held at a center in which he was going to go and speak, and people were paying $180 for general admission to $300 to enter this place to go hear the guy speak. These Palestinian activists filed a legal brief to prevent this war criminal who has, they say, the blood of millions of Palestinians, Lebanese, Syrians, and Arabs on his hands from coming to Canada. They didn't want him here at all. He actually wasn't here on some sort of a state visit, is my understanding. It was not facilitated or organized by the Canadian state, which is a little bit funny when you think about it, because he has such favorable ties with, if not Trudeau himself, then Chrystia Freeland, the deputy prime minister. But the activists here said that they weren't, if they had to have him come into the country, that they weren't going to allow him to set up and have this event without any disruptions, given all the crimes he's committed. So they shut down streets. They protested. Every single car that was attempting to enter this event was delayed. And they made sure that it was the most hostile possible environment for this guy to come. And they actually made a lot of noise playing Palestinian music through loudspeakers, and to the point where people actually came out of the event after he began speaking and started arguing with the police. There were dozens of police officers that were guarding this event, and they said, why don't you do something about this? And of course, it was a big disruption. And so it was quite a success.
Wow. He's quoted, Bennett is quoted in a couple of media reports that I saw where someone had been discussing with him, the problems he was going to encounter and the legal ramifications of this filing that was made to keep him out of Canada. And he was quoted as saying, I've killed lots of Arabs. What's the problem? There's no problem with that.
Yeah, absolutely. While he was in power, he oversaw the construction of Zionist settlements, the displacement of Palestinian people, an increase of settler violence, and, fascist rhetoric. And so this is someone who, absolutely shouldn't have been allowed to begin with to enter the country. But this is all, of course, a part of, the way in which Canada is run right now under the Trudeau administration. This is someone who is friends with Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister, and everyone she runs around with. This is a country, Canada, that is now run quite literally by a Zionist lobby as well as a very particular Ukrainian lobby. And so we're going to see, we've seen lots of figures come through the country like this. And on the one hand, you are able to express support vocally, openly in support of Zionism, in support of extremist forces in Europe, including the Ukrainian president. But under no circumstances here can you ever fly a Russian flag or show solidarity with Palestine. And if you do, you risk being canceled and even pulled from your job. That has become the reality in this country. The activists who went out to protest and shut down the street outside of this center where Bennett spoke, they actually risk their jobs and their livelihoods by doing that because of the way in which you get doxxed in this country for doing any sort of Palestinian solidarity activism, and the way in which you actually get stalked for that kind of activity, whether it's in academia, whether it's these sorts of direct actions or advocacy. It's absolutely banned in this country, any sort of free speech or free thinking or expression that goes against the Canadian state line, which of course is Global Affairs Canada, largely dictated by Chrystia Freeland and these lobbies.
Canada has really done some remarkable things in the last couple of years. The truckers' strike and the protests that they had in Ottawa last winter, whenever it was, against the vaccine mandates, there was an aggressive state response to that I've never seen, where they even went after the funds, not just the funds that were raised to support the truckers, but the funds of the people who made contributions to this. It's this extremely aggressive response. Palestinian rights, nowhere in Europe or North America does anyone respect that. So I'm guessing that people who are supporting this are facing even worse sanctions from the state.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are fearful of keeping their money, their salaries in Canadian banks. They're fearful of getting their money taken away from them or their banks locked. Maybe that's what you were referring to, which took place during that convoy. And, it's a very delicate situation for a lot of people here in terms of what happened with the mandates and the lockdown. There were, it was very polarized. There were people who were both, in favor of or supporting the people who were participating in those protests, and there are other people who were very much against them. But a lot of people agreed now in hindsight that, these sorts of sweeping policies and requiring everybody on a blanket level to be vaccinated was a bad idea, and that, the government was using some very far-reaching measures that actually might have further implications, and that we allowed them to do this without any pushback from the left. But that's to say that because Canadians have for so long been so silent on, the quelling of their rights, the ongoing neoliberalization, privatization of the Canadian economy, that things have gotten even more difficult to where it's even more impossible to speak freely against these state policies under the Trudeau administration, which has been not only obviously a threat in terms of these imperialist policies, which affect us who are living or from the global south, in terms of mining operations, transnationals, literally cooing governments in order to take the natural resources of those countries, but also here, the issues of Indigenous rights. They still found, even recently, probably within the last 2 years, another mass grave of Indigenous children on, these in these northern areas where these children were taken from their families and put in these residential school systems only to be killed. I mean, Canada has not in any way atoned for that or really made right with that situation. There's still very difficult, horrible conditions under which Indigenous people in this country, throughout the country, live, and that hasn't changed under this administration, despite all the rhetoric and largely, especially this month, which is Pride Month, which the administration would like to pride itself on, of course, those sorts of issues, hasn't made right with the First Peoples, Native peoples of this country, this land.
And one might draw a parallel between the condition of the First Peoples here and the Palestinians in Palestine.
Precisely.
Camila, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you bringing us up to speed on this, and hope to speak with you again very soon.
Thank you, Don.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.